Hello, this is Christopher DeLay, again continuing my PKI Basics series. And today we'll cover manual certificate enrollment. So the previous videos were on certification authorities, certificates, enrollment, auto enrollment, and this one's going to actually be on manual enrollment. Hopefully the audio for this one turns out okay. The microphone that I've been using for the last several years, it's kind of not working very well. In fact, I recorded this video previously and it was just filled with like fuzz, so I'm kind of redoing this now. But hopefully this works out all right and hopefully the audio turns out all right for everyone. So once again, I'm doing this PKI Basics series for those that are new to PKI that kind of want to understand how it works, whether it's because you're going to be like a PKI administrator or just because you want to learn about certificates in PKI. There are other videos on my YouTube, and you can also go to my website, which is https://xdot509.blog, and I have a lot of articles there. Most of the articles are information around PKI, how to do certain administration tasks in PKI, so be sure to go ahead and check that out. So this is going to be the topics that we're going to cover. So we're going to cover Certreq, web enrollment, and basically using the MMC to enroll. So start first with Certreq. So Certreq is a command line utility that you can use to request certificates. It's kind of not used as much today. It was used like in the Windows 2000, Windows 2003 days when the MMC wasn't as versatile as it is now in terms of requesting certificates. And so a lot of the stuff that you would have done in the past with Certreq, you do with the certificates Microsoft Management Console today. So here are some of the things you can do with the Certreq. You can generate certificate requests, you can submit a certificate request, you can retrieve a certificate from a CA, and you can accept and install a response to a certificate request. And you can also apparently sign a cross-certification certificate request. There's a link there, so you could go there and find out more information about Certreq. So here are some of the command line options. So some of these I have used a lot and some I never have used. So the first one is -submit. So after you generate your request, you use that to submit your request to the CA. And then there's -retrieve. This would be after you do the -submit and you get your certificates approved. You can then use this to retrieve the certificate from the CA. There's -new. So -new is used to generate a new request file. So the thing that's a little bit awkward with Certreq is that you have to create this INF file to basically generate a request file. And so this INF file has its own syntax. I'll have an example of a sample one, but basically you use this new command against this INF file and generate a request file, which you can then submit to the CA. There's -accept. So -accept is after you've retrieved the certificate, you want to install it and download it into the certificate store. You basically do the -accept option. One mistake that a lot of folks run into, in fact I ran into it earlier on in my career, is you get a cert back and you go ahead and you just import it to the store and you're like, hey, why is there no private key attached to this thing? And it's because just importing in the store does not bind the certificate to the private key. So if you want to do that binding part, you have to do the -accept. And if you already imported it, you can use -accept again to bring it in, or you can use, I guess, repair store or certutil -repair store at that point to bind it up. -policy, I'm not too familiar with this one. I've never really used it. It might have something to do with setting like name constraints or something in certificates, but I'm not 100% sure of that one. -sign, again, I've never used this. Apparently it's for signing a cross-certification or qualified subordination request. So those terms just mean it's a way of creating a trust between two PKIs using cross-certification. So it's really not something we're going to get into in this video, but it may be good to be aware of in case you ever run in that scenario, which you probably never will. So then there's the -enroll. So again, I've never used this option, so I'm not too familiar with what that does. Now obviously if you're interested in kind of exploring some of these other options, there's a link here at the bottom of the page, and you can go ahead and take a look at that and get some more information on these commands. So we're going to do a demo requesting a certificate with Certreq. So again, like I said, you have to use this .inf file to generate the request. So this is where I got my INF file here. So I went to this website. I'll go ahead and try to remember to include it in the description. And this has kind of like a sample one, basically, that you can go through and use this as the basis for creating your own .inf file. It does kind of comment some of the different options here that are available, so you can take this and customize it. Obviously, you can do some additional research and figure out there's additional settings you need or whatever. This will probably work for most situations. So I am going to go to my domain controller, and I already have an INF file, so I basically took that and the one I just showed you, and I just changed the subject and the subject alternative names. Everything else I left kind of the same, so I'm going to use this to generate my request. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do, I'm on my desktop, so I'm going to do Certreq -new, and then I'm going to do my inf file, INF file, and then I'm just going to cleverly name the request.req. So all I do is run that command, and it goes through and generates my request file. So now I need to submit that request to the CA. In this specific example, I don't have certificate manager approval enabled for this template, so that means it'll automatically get approved. So if you have, there'll be some additional steps if you have to get your certificate approved by the certificate manager. So I'm going to go here and do Certreq-submit, and then I'm also going to do my request file. There are some additional options, like I believe you can specify, I think you can specify the CA that you want to send it to, and I think if you want to select the template outside of the request, and there may be some other options as well that you can do in the command line, but in this example I'm just going to go ahead and submit my request to the CA. So I do that, it brings up this GUI. Since I didn't supply which CA I want to go to, it gives me this GUI, and I select my CA. And then it actually does the retrieve here for me, so it kind of goes through and says, hey, where do you want to download the cert to? So I'm going to just call it new cert1. And I'm just going to go ahead and save that off there to my desktop. So now I have to import it into the store and bind it to the private key. So here's where I'm going to do my Certreq-accept. And cert new. Was it new cert? Okay, so here's my Certreq-accept, so I'm going to run that. And then it'll be imported into my computer store. So if I open up, let me do it to the command line so you can actually see what's going on here. So I'm going to do certlm.msc. So this is going to bring it up and look at our certificates. And here is my request from today. So I can open this up and I can look and I can see that the subject name is the one I specified. And if I want to do double check, I could also check that my two SANs are in the certificate, which they are. So that's the whole process with Certreq. Again, there might be some edge case scenarios where you use this, but for the most part you won't. But it is good to be aware of it, because there may be some scenarios where you just want to pull a cert from the CA real quick. So it gives you some options for doing things like that. So now we're going to return to the slide deck here. So that was the demo. So next we're going to talk about web enrollment. So the web enrollment pages are these web pages where you can submit requests to the CA. And so they've been around forever, and they really haven't been updated at all, and I don't think there's any plans to update them. So they look kind of old. They're kind of not the greatest solution, but they are there. They're not, again, needed as much because everything you can do through the web enrollment. Let's see, is that true? You can, so from the certificates MMC, you can generate requests. So the one thing that you can't do to the MMC is like submit requests that you've already generated. So that you would either need the web enrollment or to use to use the Certreq tool. So you'd have to use one of those two. Like say if you have a Linux box, used OpenSSL to generate a request. Well, in that case, you would basically need to go through and either use the web enrollment pages or Certreq. So the web enrollment pages allow you to request certificates from the CA. You can download the CA certificate, you can download the chain, you can download the CRL, and you can basically submit request to the CA through this tool. As mentioned at the bottom here, like I said earlier, it's a lot of times it's used by you have an appliance or a third-party OS like Linux or Unix or something. You generate a request on that box and you want to submit it to the CA. So this is what it's typically used for. Now there are some things to consider when using web enrollment. And so what I mean by that is specifically around the templates. So let's go to our CA and we'll take a look at the templates and talk about some of the things that we want to keep in mind as we do this work. So I'm going to open the template MMC and then talk about those. So I'm going to go to my copy of web server since it has more options because it's a version 2 template. So for the certificate template to show up in the web enrollment pages, your user account has to have read and enroll permissions because remember you're going to this web page through Internet Explorer. I've never tried Edge. Edge maybe supported. I doubt it though. But definitely like Google Chrome and Firefox are not really supported for doing requests. There are some specific scenarios where you can request certificates through Chrome if your CA is set up in a certain way, but really you should just avoid using Chrome or Firefox because 90% of the scenarios is not going to work. So you're better off just using Internet Explorer, even though it's considered deprecated. I'm going to do another video that goes into more detail on web enrollment. When I do that one, I'll take a look at using Edge versus IE and see what the difference is there, see if Edge has kind of got any compatibility with the web enrollment sites at all. So yeah, so the first thing you want to think about is you're going to typically be using Internet Explorer. Again, for the template to show up, you're going to have to basically have read and enroll permissions at the very least. So read and enroll permissions for it to even show up. Now, user certificates will show up for sure if you have read and enroll permissions to them. Not all computer certificate templates will show up. Computer certificate templates will only show up if the subject name is set to supply in the request. If you have a computer template and it's set to build from this Active Directory information, it won't show up in the web enrollment. The other thing to keep in mind is you can only use version 1 or version 2 templates. So if you look in here, I have like some templates that are a newer version. So we're looking at the schema version here. So let's see if we have a newer template here. Let's sort by schema version. Yeah, so I have this version 3 template here. So version 3 and version 4 templates won't show up in the web enrollment pages, so just keep in mind if you want a template to show up in the web enrollment pages, it needs to be either a version 1 or a version 2 template. If you want to hear more about different templates, you can go to the enrollment, certificate enrollment video I did a couple of weeks back, and that will discuss that, the difference between those versions. I'm trying to think if there's any other limitations. For the most part, that's kind of the limitations. So you want to take those things into consideration if you are going to be using the web enrollment server. So the web enrollment server the web enrollment role service can be installed on the CA. It's not recommended that you install it on the CA because the CA, the certification authority, is really like a sensitive system, similar to in the way that domain controllers are a sensitive system. Consider if you're using the tiered model to Active Directory administration, they're at tier 0. So basically, you don't want to install additional services on the CA like a web server because it just increases the attack surface. But generally people, for whatever reason, because it's easier, just install it on the CA. The best practice would be to install it on another server that's not the CA, and when it's done in this configuration, that server is called the Web Enrollment Proxy. And so when you install it on a different server, the website has to be able to impersonate either your user, well, it's all user account because you're going to the browser. It needs to impersonate your user account to the CA, so you basically have to set up Kerberos delegation to do that. And then once you set up Kerberos delegation, the web server will be able to impersonate you to the CA, and then you can request certificates and send them back to you. There are instructions for setting up the Web Enrollment Proxy. This is at some point I'm going to do my own article on this, setting up the Web Enrollment Proxy, because there's some additional things I've learned over the years. But in the meantime, this is the one I use for whenever I have to troubleshoot the Web Enrollment Proxy here. So if I need a troubleshooter, install the Web Enrollment Proxy, I go through and use this video. I'm going to make my own video and cite that page at some point, because there's some additional, like I said, there's some additional information I found out over the years. So next we're going to do the web enrollment demo. So I'm going to go to my CA and do it from there. Let's see, this is the one I want here. Yep. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up Internet Explorer. And basically, a lot of times it's just the FQDN of the server that's used. And then in my specific scenario, I set up a CNAME called Web Enroll, and then I think this is, I don't remember whether my web enrollment's running under, like, it's probably running under a service account. So under the service account, I have the SPN Web Enroll registered. So I'm just going to go to HTTPS. webenroll.fourthcoffee.com, and then into the certserv virtual directory, which will bring me up to the web enrollment pages. On a client, OSs are usually configured to pass through authentication here, pass through your credentials, but I'm on a server, so it's going to prompt, IE is configured to prompt me for my credentials. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my credentials here to access the web enrollment site. And then in a minute, the web enrollment pages should load. So I have some different options here. So obviously the last two options are for downloading chains, or the second option is you can, if you have a certificate request that's in the pending state because it requires certificate to manage approval, you would go in there. If you want to download the chain or the CRL or the CA certificate, you can click on the last link. We're going to go into request a certificate. Now apparently I have access to the user template, which is apparently available, so I could click on this and user certificate and get a user certificate. Or my other options is to click advanced certificate request, which brings me to two options. So previously I mentioned that usually this is used for, like, if you already generated a request and you want to just submit it to the CA. So if that's the case, you'd select the second option. And then you could paste your request in here, open up the request file, copy the text out of it, and paste it in here. And then select which template you want to use. And then the thing I was going to mention here is that if you're using an enterprise CAs use templates, so you always have to select a template when you're generating a request. That's the only way you can issue a cert. So whether you're using Certreq, like in Certreq, it's in my request. And here I'm just selecting the template, and so I have to select a template when submitting a request. So I can do that and submit it to the CA and then get a certificate back. My other option is to create and submit a request to the CA, and it'll bring up a little form that I can fill out to request a certificate. So some things about this, I'm not going to spend too much time going over stuff like this, but in IE, it really should be in your compatibility view settings, and then in your security zones in Internet Explorer, it should be either in local internet or trusted sites for this to work. So keep that in mind if it's not working for you. So here I'm going to select web server, and I'm just going to do similar to the previous certificate I requested. FCDC 01.4thcoffee.com. The one thing before I submit this certificate that I want to also mention is, since you're doing this through the browser, you're doing it in the context of the user. So this certificate is going to get imported into the user store. So for my particular situation here, this isn't going to turn out too well for me, because see, this mark keys as exportable is grayed out here because that's how it's configured on the template. So when I go through and enroll for this computer template, it's going to put it in the user certificate store, and of course I would need to export it from that user certificate store and put it in the computer store. So if you are using like a web server template or something like that you want to get through here, make sure you mark the keys as exportable on the template so that you can export it from the user store. So here's my name. I'm going to leave the rest of this blank, the rest of the x.500 name blank, and then I'm going to choose 2048. You can set a minimum key size on the template, so but I'm going to select 2048. In fact, if the minimum key size is set to 2048, I won't, even if I'm able to select these lower options, it won't let me to be able to actually request a certificate. So I have this set to 2048, and then I'm going to go through. This SHA-1 here has nothing to do with the end certificate I get. This is the hashing algorithm that's used for the signatures on the request. So this selecting this isn't going to make me have a SHA-1 certificate. I know a lot of folks see that and they start to freak out, but that's not the case. I can put my friendly name in here, like if I wanted to put TLS cert. You put that in there. Attributes, one of the things you can specify in attributes, and there are probably others as well, is my subject alternative name. So the format I need to use for that is, we need to go back to my domain controller, which I believe is this last one here. And I'm going to go through and open my request.inf file. This has the exact format I need to, at least I'm 99% sure this has the exact format I need to request the SAN in. So I'm just going to copy that out here. And we'll find out in a minute if it's the right or wrong one. But I'm going to paste this in here. This should give me my two SAN names. And then I'm going to submit, and we're going to see if that works. So I'm going to go ahead and click install this. Actually, I'm just going to click save this response. Well, install this certificate is fine. So that certificate will now be stored. Obviously the SAN must have worked, or it would have got some sort of error back. So that has so I basically went through and requested a certificate through the web enrollment pages, and that's how you would do it. So let's see what's next here. So this is the web enrollment proxy. Well, I kind of discussed this, but the web enrollment proxy is basically how, if you install the web enrollment pages on a system that's not a CA, so how this is kind of the flow of how that works. So you go to the web enrollment pages, you get prompted for credentials, you put in your credentials, the client requests a TGS Kerberos ticket for the web enrollment site. The one thing that I'll definitely clean up for my web enrollment video is I'm not 100% sure, now that I think about it, whether this is actually the user getting like affordable TGT and passing it on to the web server, or if the web server is just authenticating against the AD and getting a TGT that it can use forwardable. So anyways, regardless, the client's going to authenticate to the website. The website is going to have affordable TGT, which means it can now request a Kerberos ticket to the CA. So it's going to request a ticket to the CA on behalf of the user, so basically impersonating the user, and then it's going to use that to authenticate to the CA. It's going to request the certificate, get the certificate back, and then send it back to the user. So that's pretty much the whole process with the proxy. So like I said, I'm going to do some videos and articles on both web enrollment and web enrollment proxy. So if you give me a little bit of time, a few weeks, you should see that posted to my blog and to YouTube. Next, we're going to talk about MMC enrollment. So this is basically using the certificates MMC. This is really where most of your requests probably should go through. The certificates MMC is pretty powerful in terms of it gives you a lot of different options to request certificates. There are some applications like IIS, the web server, it has its own like certificate request utility built into it, and it's not really that great because it's not very flexible. So I would, even if you're just like requesting certs for a web server, I would recommend that you use the certificates MMC just because it does have a lot more options. So when you're using so basically you have this MMC, the certificates MMC, so you can bring this MMC up in the context of the user, the context of the computer, or the context of a service account running on the computer. We're going to just cover the user and computer stores in this video. So the user certificate store, the MMC at least that manages that store, can be accessed through running certmgr.msc. Alternatively, you can open mmc.exe and kind of add the certificates MMC targeted for the user. Actions taken in that context are done in the context of the user, so keep that in mind. If you're going to want to request a machine cert, doing it in the context of the user is not going to be very helpful for you. And so the MMC can be used to view certificates, enroll for certificates, view certificate request, and generate certificate request, and view certificates stored in the user's certificate attribute. So there's other things that can be, there's a few other functionalities, the functionality that's there aside from just requesting certificates. But this is what we're going to use to request a certificate. And so here's the computer certificate store. So since 2012 something, maybe just since 2012, you can just open certlm.msc and that'll open up the computer certificate store, or at least the MMC that manages that store. Prior to that, you had to open up mmc.exe and add the MMC for the certificates MMC targeted to the computer. So it's a little bit of a shortcut there. Again, actions taken to the certlm.msc take place in the context of the computer. And the MMC for the computer can be used to view certificates, enroll for certificates, and generate certificate requests. So again, the certificates MMC can be used to enroll directly with the server. And so if you watch the previous videos on enrollment's done over RPC. Well, actually it does involve LDAP, right? So the process is as follows. The OS will go out to Active Directory and see what certificate templates are out there. It'll actually download them and cache them locally in the registry, and then it will sort through those and see which, if you're doing like a manual enrollment through the MMC, it'll filter those templates based on which ones you have read and enroll for, and then some of those other things I talked about in the certificate template, and then it'll present those in actually no, it'll go through, and any ones that you've read and enroll for, like if you're enrolling as a computer, any ones that the computer has read and enroll for will show up in the MMC. I said in the web enrollment there are some more restrictions, but we're not talking about the web enrollment right now. And aside from enrolling for a certificate, didn't actually go through the whole process there. So back up a second. So basically the enrollment process is that you go to over LDAP, you see which templates are available. It filters through which ones you have the ability to read and enroll for, and then it's going to query Active Directory for which CAs have that template. Then you're going to get like a pseudo random list back from the LDAP query on which CAs have that template, and then you're going to try the first one on that list, and then you're going to generate your request and public and private key. Private key is going to be stored on the OS, or if you're using a smart card, on the smart card, and then the request and the public key are going to be submitted to the CA, and then hopefully everything lines up. They meet the parameters, the settings in the MMC and the certificate template. Then you'll end up getting a certificate back at some point, and that'll come back over RPC. So the certificates MMC can also be used to generate certificate requests. So you can bypass that whole Certreq -new process. You can just generate these in MMC. And then the certificates MMC can also be used to process pending requests. So let's say, for example, your organization is following best practices, and they require certificate manager approval for certificates where the user can, where the enrollee can supply the request. Supply the subject or subject alternative name in the request. So this is done just so like users can't request whatever they want. So they can't request bankofamerica.com or google.com. They have to request something reasonable. So in that scenario, if that's configured, when the user submits the request, it'll go into a pending state until the certificate manager approves it, and then they can retrieve it either through the MMC or through Certreq. So there's really two demos I'm going to do here. So one is going to be certificate enrollment, and then the other demo here is going to be generating a certificate request. So I'm going to go back to this machine here, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up, let's see, which machine am I on here? I am on 2016 machine. Let me actually go to the domain controller. So I'm just going to open up certlm.msc, which is going to be my management console here. I'm not going to give you the full tour, but usually the most things you're most interested in are the personal store, where the computer certificates are stored, and then trusted roots if you want to verify that root CA is trusted, and then intermediate certs if you want to see if you have that intermediate cert in your computer store, so you can build the chain. But mainly for enrollment, we're just really concerned with this personal store. So you'll see I have some certificates already requested in here. I'm going to go ahead and do all new, request new certificate, and then I'm going to click next. Here you select your enrollment policy. For most of you, and 99.999% of you are just going to go with the default Active Directory enrollment policy. You can set up a certificate enrollment web services that would be another policy, but generally for domain managed machines that would be pushed out via GPO, and you would actually see something here, not like you'd probably see this add new, but in addition to that you'd see like an actual another policy for the web services. This add new is only really if you were going to request like a certificate from a non-domain joined machine using certificate enrollment web services. So short of it is just click next here. Now you'll see I have this template here that says RDP new, and I have this one that says web server. You notice just this web server one has the has this link here. So this is basically this RDP new. It's configured to pull the subject or subject alternative name from Active Directory. So that's why I don't need to supply any more information on it. I just go ahead and click enroll and I get a certificate back. But you'll see here for the web server cert, since we have to supply a subject name, we have to kind of go in there and add that. So we're going to go through the same process here, and I'm going to click on you can either click on the link or click details and then go to properties. So since I've been using the same format for every certificate I've requested so far, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to do, for my common name, I'm going to do fcdc01.fourthcoffee.com. And I'm going to add that for my subject name. And then for my SAN, I'm going to select DNS. And I'm going to add that same thing in the SAN. And then I'm going to add this. Just note if you're enrolling for these certificates for TLS and you have the SAN attribute populated, it's going to ignore the subject. So just keep that in mind. I don't necessarily need to have a subject in here for this, but I'm just including it as an example. So I'm going to go ahead and click apply. So that part's done. Here, if I want to, I can put a friendly name. So we'll call this TLS Cert1. And that's just the friendly name that shows up here in the MMC. Next, extensions. Potentially I can modify some of the parameters of the certificate if I want to do that. I can actually bypass the, if I go in the private key, because I'm on the requesting side, I can override that make private key exportable. So that mark private key exportable checkbox, a lot of times folks think about it as like some security mechanism. It's really not, because it can be overridden from the client. And also, even if you get a cert back that's marked as non-exportable and actually goes into the store as non-exportable. There are tools, so if you're a local admin on your system, there's a tool called Jailbreak that you can use. It basically allows you to open like a certificate MMC with the capability to bypass that feature. So we're going to go ahead and we can also go ahead and select our CA. In this example, we only have one CA, so we're going to use that. And then, let's see, I'm going to select it now. And another thing before I request this is you can do some troubleshooting. Like say if I didn't see my template that I was looking for in here, I can show all templates, and then for ones that don't show up, it'll have an explanation of why it doesn't show up. So like this administrator, it says I don't have permissions to request this type of template. And let's see, we see some other examples. So permissions. This requested template is not supported by the CA, so that means this template's not on the CA. And if we take a look at examples like the user one, it'll say this type of certificate can only be issued to a user, and of course I am using the computer MMC. So you can do that for troubleshooting if you don't see your template show up, and these error messages can help you narrow down what the problem is. But I am just going to go through and get rid of those, and then go ahead and enroll for my certificate. And then there we go. So there's my new certificate, the TLS Cert 1. It's right here. So that's how you use the MMC. There is another thing that you can use the MMC for, and that's if you just want to, for whatever reason, want to generate a REQ or request file. You can go through here and do all tasks, advanced operations, create custom request, and then I can use my enrollment policy. I can go without an enrollment policy. I'm just going to do this one with the enrollment policy. So I can pick which template I want to base my request on. Is there also an option to use? So I guess if you don't want to use a template for some reason, like you were going to submit a request to a standalone CA, then I think you would, where you had a chance to select the policy, you would have selected no policy. But I selected a policy, so it's going to present me with the templates. I'm just going to select web server here since that's the one we've been working with. And now I can customize request. So I'm basically going to do the same thing here that I did previously. Change this to DNS. Add this, and then I'm going to add my fourthcoffee.com. Add that. You know, I can put my TLS Cert 2 here if I want to. That's my friendly name. And then I have some other options like the other template. I can kind of go through and change these options. So let's do more private key is exportable. And then I go ahead and click OK. And then next. And I'm just going to save this to my desktop here. And I'm going to do sample.req, and I'm going to go ahead and save that, and then I'm going to go ahead and click finish here. So now if I want to take a look at that request, I could basically do cert util sample and see it will dump out the request, and I could take a look at it if I wanted to. So that's generating the request through the MMC. So that's basically how you use the MMC. So that pretty much covers the whole process for enrollment. There are like at least two other methods for enrollment. One is to use the Network Device Enrollment Service, which uses Cisco Simple Certificate Enrollment Protocol, otherwise known as CEP. Or there's also the Certificate Enrollment Web Services, which I mentioned a little bit during this video. At some point I do have a bunch of blog postings about the NDES service on my blog, so you can check that out. But I will do a video on that at some point and get into more detail on the NDES service. So that pretty much wraps this one up. So thank you for taking the time to view this video. Like I said, I will have some upcoming videos on web enrollment at some point, the web enrollment proxy, and the network device enrollment service. So if you have any other ideas of things you would like me to cover, you can add a comment underneath this video, or you can go to my blog, which is again is https://xdot509.blog, and you can go to the contact page there and you can submit your comment to me. I'm thinking about possibly creating like a podcast channel, and maybe at least at first just doing these videos as podcasts, so if somebody wants to download them on their phone and just listen to them as podcasts, they can do that. So I don't know, I haven't committed to doing that yet, but that's kind of possibly on the roadmap. But anyways, hopefully this video was helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, leave a comment, let me know, and pass the word on to others that are interested in learning PKI. Let them know about my blog or my YouTube channel. So thank you, and have a good day.